All right, I'm at the point where I'm ready to mark on the block itself which areas I need to keep. And this is my yellow block. So I have my sketch here as a reference just in case this isn't enough information. And I'm going to color code the areas that I want to keep on the block. So if you have the paints in the right colors, you could paint on each block the corresponding color that fills the areas that you need to not cut away on the block. If you have crayons or colored pencils, that may also work fine. I was just planning to dilute some of these acrylic inks down to a watery consistency and just quickly paint in the areas that I wanted to keep. If you don't have the options of the many colors, then I'd suggest maybe just choosing a Sharpie marker that's in a color that's different than the ink color that you printed from your key block. Using black might get kind of complicated or confusing. So in this case, if I didn't have these colors, maybe I would just choose green and use it on all three of my blocks. So I'd have a blue block, a yellow block, and a red block. And I would just have to be a little more careful to make sure I kept track of which block corresponded to which color of ink. You could write it on the edge of the block, if that makes sense. Some of you may be using both sides of your block. So in that case, you might have to be a little bit more creative on how to remind yourself which side of the block is for which colors. Once you've cut away a large area of the block, you can write on that area too, and it shouldn't affect the way anything prints. It would be in the low areas of the block. So that is a safe spot to indicate, the top of the image. If you've got an abstraction that you might not be able to tell which is the top real easily, sometimes I'll draw an arrow to keep all of my blocks straight as I'm printing them in sequence. Since I do have the colors that I need, I will go ahead and dilute down some of this yellow ink to start with, and then we'll paint in on the block those areas that we need to keep yellow. So I'm just, again, looking at my sketch as well as my tracing paper here, and I'll be painting in the areas that I need to keep on this block. So it'll be these three sections here. And don't need to be super careful either. I think I will paint some of that flame area. I wasn't quite exact when I transfer that. This brush is getting a little bit big for the basket area, but I think I can use it for painting the landscape area down here. So we want the fields to be yellow, and all of these trees will have some yellow in them as well, since they'll be green in the end. That field too is good. For the basket, I'll switch to a little bit smaller brush. And there's that little bit of the inside of the basket. I also want to have some yellow on there. So I double check to make sure I hit all of the areas that I intended to. If the acrylic is so thick that it's leaving streaks, you can add a little bit more water. You don't want to be building up a relief surface in the ink layer itself or in the paint layer. So make sure it's thin enough that it doesn't interfere with the way the brayer picks up the ink. Rinse both of these out, and we'll use those same brushes for the next color. It won't matter if a little bit of yellow gets in there. All right, for the red, dilute that down a little bit as well. Get the yellow block out of here. Bring in the red block. So the red blocks, we need to have, again, our sketch is oriented backwards. I'm going to flip it over. I put it underneath plexi so it would lay flat. That will help me a little bit more, actually. All right, so the reds need to be on these three sections. And if you make a mistake color coding, it's not a huge deal. You can always change things as you carve. We need a little bit of the flame to be red. We need the left side of the basket to be red. We need the mountaintops, mountains to have some red in them so that they print as a purple once they mix with the blue. I want, these may not end up being solid red, but for now I'll go ahead and color code them so that I remember that I want to shift the trees to a little bit darker value than the fields. And this mountain, actually I didn't need to be that careful on those trees because this will also all be red. Then I just double check to make sure that I spotted everything. I needed to add another line here for the snow-capped mountains. I had not cut that into my key block, so I needed to draw in a reference on my blue plate and on my purple plate since they'll be sharing that bottom edge of where the snow ends. Got the fire. Okay, I think the red block is good. The blue block will be almost all left. The only parts we'll be cutting away are areas where we need the basket to be yellow and orange and where we need the balloon to be yellow, orange, green, and red. And then a little bit removed from the clouds and a little bit removed from the mountaintops. So most of that will be getting painted in. A little bit more. It's a different brush. Okay, so really, this edge is blue. I think I'll paint a little bit of blue up into the clouds, the bottom half of the clouds at least. And these more distant hills will have some blue printed on them. The sandbags, I will leave a little bit of white on that one that's facing the sun, but the others will be in shadow, so they'll have some blue printed on them. I want a little bit of shadow on the brazier, the inside of the balloon, that ellipse. And then this strip of the balloon will also have some blue in it. All right. Now down here, if I want any of the tree, well, I'll think about that. If I want any of these areas to stay bright yellow, then I should not paint the blue over those areas. I can decide some of that as I'm cutting too. So for now, I guess we'll just kind of treat all of this area down here, except for where the snow will be, as part of the blue block. Okay, I'll do a double check, make sure I didn't forget anything. I think those sandbags will have some blue on them. That looks pretty good. I have some ink puddled up on here, so I'm going to blot it a little bit to help the block dry a little bit faster. It's just a tissue. And then once the blocks have really dried thoroughly, I might even use a hair dryer to speed it up a little bit more. Once they're pretty thoroughly dry, I may still seal them all with future floor polish, some acrylic base floor polish, to just make sure that none of these colors transfer off into my inks. Since I color coded them close to the colors that I'll be printing, I'm not too worried about it, but I wouldn't want some of the black to transfer off onto my yellow, into my yellow ink and make it muddy. So I think I will seal them. If you don't have the option of sealing them, after you carve it, you could also lightly sand the extra ink off the top surface, or just print it several times until any ghost image from the black or from the colors that you don't want no longer are printing onto your paper. So there are a lot of ways to kind of solve that problem.